At 10 degrees below zero, a human has 47 seconds before hypothermia begins its deadly work. The cold doesn't ask permission. It simply takes first the fingers, then the toes, then the will to keep moving forward. Liana Moonshadow lasted 6 hours. Impossible, the medical texts would say. No human could survive that long. But Liana wasn't entirely human. She carried alpha bloodline in her veins, ancient powerful wolf genetics that should have made her nearly invincible, should have let her heal from any wound, should have kept her warm even in the deepest winter, should have. But 9 years ago, someone had made sure those gifts would never save her. The blizzard screaming through the northern Montana Rockies wasn't just weather. It was a living thing, a white beast with teeth of ice and claws of wind that stripped the world down to nothing but snow and darkness. The temperature had been dropping for 3 days straight, and now on this fourth night it had reached the kind of cold that makes the trees crack like rifle shots and turns breath to ice crystals before it leaves your lungs. Somewhere in that howling white void, a young woman was dying. She didn't know her name, hadn't known it for 9 years. The memories were gone, locked away, behind a wall of dark magic and trauma so deep that even her dreams were empty. But she knew pain. Pain was the only constant in a life that had become nothing but survival. One freezing night after another, one desperate meal after another, one more day of not knowing who she was or where she came from. Tonight, the pain was worse than usual. The wound in her left hip kept bleeding. It had been 6 hours since the attack, 6 hours since 3 massive wolves had cornered her in a ravine 20 miles south of here. She'd run because running was all she knew how to do anymore. But wolves were faster. One of them had gotten its teeth into her, had ripped through cloth and skin and muscle searching for the femoral artery that would end her quickly. It had almost succeeded. She'd gotten away by pure luck. A rock slide triggered by her scrambling had buried 2 of them, and the third had lost her scent in a creek. But the damage was done. The wound was deep, too deep, and it wouldn't stop bleeding. A normal wolf would have healed it by now. Even a normal human would have clotted by now. But he was neither, not anymore. She was something broken. Her feet had stopped feeling anything an hour ago. Her hands were worse. The fingers had turned waxy white, then blue, and now they barely bent when she tried to make a fist. The thin tattered coat she wore might as well have been made of paper for all the protection it offered. Underneath, her clothes were soaked with blood and melted snow clinging to her skin like ice. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been warm. The forest around her was ancient old-growth pine and spruce that had stood for centuries, their branches so thick with snow they formed a solid white ceiling overhead. Normally, that canopy would provide some shelter from the wind, but tonight the storm was too strong. It found every gap, every opening, turning the forest into a wind tunnel that stole what little heat her body still generated. She stumbled over a buried root and went down hard. The impact drove the air from her lungs and sent a fresh wave of agony through her hip. For a long moment, she just lay there face down in the snow, too exhausted to move. Get up, something whispered in the back of her mind. Get up or you'll die here. She'd heard that voice before. It had kept her alive for 9 years, through winters and summers, through starvation and injuries, through moments when giving up would have been so much easier. The voice never identified itself, never explained why it cared if she lived or died. It just insisted over and over that she keep going. But tonight the voice was quieter than usual. Tonight it sounded like it was giving up too. She managed to push herself to her hands and knees, swaying there in the snow like a wounded animal. Blood dripped from her hip, bright red against the white ground. Too much blood, too fast. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges, a grey fog creeping in from all sides. This is it, she thought distantly. This is where it ends. She'd always wondered in a vague sort of way how she would die. Would it be starvation, exposure, another animal attack, or would she simply walk off a cliff one day, too tired and confused to notice the edge? The not knowing had been almost worse than the dying itself, just one more mystery in a life that had become nothing but questions without answers. At least now she would know. The cold was actually starting to feel warm. She'd heard that before from voices half remembered around campfires or snippets of conversation overheard in the towns she sometimes passed through. When you're freezing to death, your body gets confused. The blood vessels in your skin open up in a last desperate attempt to warm you, and suddenly the cold feels like heat. People strip off their clothes. They dig into the snow like it's a soft bed. They smile as they die, thinking they've finally found warmth. She could feel it starting, that false heat creeping through her limbs, making the agony in her hips seem distant and unimportant. It would be so easy to just lie down, to close her eyes, to let the snow cover her like a blanket and drift away into nothing. But the voice spoke again, stronger this time. Not yet, not like this. She forced herself forward. One hand, one knee, then the other hand, the other knee. Her hips screamed protest with every movement, but she ignored it. She'd gotten very good at ignoring pain over the years. It was just noise, just her body's way of complaining about a situation she couldn't fix anyway. The trees were thinning ahead. Through the snow, she could see open ground, a small clearing maybe, or a frozen meadow, somewhere without shelter, somewhere the wind would hit her full force. Going out there would be suicide, but staying here would be suicide too. She crawled forward. The clearing opened up before her like a white arena. In the center stood a single tree, massive and ancient, its trunk as thick as 3 men, standing shoulder to shoulder. The branches were bare of needles silvered with ice, reaching up into the storm like frozen lightning. At its base, the roots had created a small hollow barely visible under the accumulated snow. Shelter. The word bubbled up from somewhere important but meaningless. What good was shelter now? She was already dying. The wound, the cold, the exhaustion, they'd already won. This was just the end game, the final few minutes before her body gave up completely. But something made her keep moving. She reached the tree and collapsed into the hollow between its roots. The snow here was deeper, softer, and for just a moment, it did feel like a bed. She curled into it, pulling her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around herself in a futile attempt to conserve heat that was already gone. Her core temperature was 88 degrees Fahrenheit. Not that she knew that, but her body knew. Her heart knew, beating slower and slower, struggling to push blood that was turning thick and sluggish through veins that were constricting against the cold. Her brain knew, shutting down non-essential functions, one by one, conserving energy for the final desperate battle to stay alive. She was losing that battle. The grey fog at the edges of her vision was spreading, creeping inward like nightfall. Her thoughts were fragmenting, becoming disconnected and strange. She saw faces she didn't recognize, a man with kind eyes, a woman with hair like midnight, a small boy laughing. Were they memories, hallucinations? She didn't know. Couldn't tell anymore what was real and what her dying brain was creating to comfort her. The wind howled overhead, but she barely heard it now. The cold was everywhere, but it didn't hurt anymore. Her heart beat once, twice. The pauses between grew longer, and then something changed. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a sight. It was deeper than that, more fundamental. Like the world itself had suddenly turned its attention toward her, focusing with an intensity that made her dying thoughts scatter like startled birds. Power. That was the only word for it. Raw, ancient, overwhelming power rolling across the clearing like an invisible wave. It pressed against her skin, into her bones, made her chest tighten even though her lungs had almost stopped working. She tried to open her eyes, but her eyelids were frozen shut. Tried to move, but her muscles wouldn't respond. She was trapped in her own body, helpless as that power drew closer. Then came the howl. It wasn't like any wolf howl she'd heard in 9 years of living in the wild. This was something older, something that made the storm itself seem quiet. It rolled across the clearing like thunder, deep and resonant, shaking snow from the branches overhead. And inside that howl was a single word, a name that her mind couldn't quite grasp, but her soul recognized instantly. Lyanna. Her name. Her real name. The one she'd forgotten 9 years ago when the brand had been pressed into her back and her memories had been burned away. Hearing it now spoken by that impossible voice was like being struck by lightning. Something inside her, something that had been sleeping, broken, locked away, stirred. But it was too late. Her heart beat one final time, then stopped. The darkness swallowed her completely. 20 miles north of that clearing in a fortress that had stood for 300 years, AlphaKing Saga. Blackridge stood at the highest window of Iron Peak and stared into the storm. He'd been standing there for an hour, not moving, barely breathing, just staring into the white chaos beyond the glass, as if he could see through it to something only he knew was there. "My lord," Garrick's voice came from behind him, carefully neutral. "The patrols are all accounted for. No one should be out in this." Theron didn't turn, didn't acknowledge the words. His second in command, who was used to this by now 300 years of service, had taught Garrick when to push and when to simply wait. This was clearly a waiting moment. The fortress around them was alive with sound warriors, moving through the halls, fires crackling in dozens of hearths, the normal noise of a pack settlement on a winter night. But Theron heard none of it. His entire being was focused on the storm on the mountains beyond, on something his wolf could sense, but his human mind couldn't quite grasp. A scent. It had started 3 hours ago, so faint he thought he was imagining it. A thread of fragrance carried on the wind, impossible and undeniable all at once. Pine needles crushed underfoot after summer rain, wood smoke from a hearth fire, and underneath it all, wild lilac, a flower that couldn't possibly bloom in this frozen wasteland. But it wasn't the scent itself that had frozen him at this window. It was what it meant. In 300 years of life, Theron had ruled the northern territories with absolute control. He'd united the clans, ended the rogue wars, built a kingdom from chaos. He'd done it all alone, without the one thing that most alphas considered essential: a mate, the fated bond that gave a wolf their other half, their perfect complement. He'd accepted long ago that such a thing wasn't meant for him. Some wolves died without finding their mate. He would be one of them. Until tonight, until that scent had hit him like a physical blow, and his wolf Fenris, the ancient and powerful beast that shared his soul, had risen from a slumber that had lasted centuries and roared a single word: mate. "Saddle Obsidian," Theron said, his voice cutting through the ambient noise like a blade. Garrick went very still. "My lord, now. The storm is irrelevant." Theron finally turned from the window. His eyes, normally a cool silver grey, were glowing with inner fire. "She's out there. She's dying. And if you delay me another second, I will remove you from my path." There was no anger in the words, just absolute certainty. Garrick had served long enough to recognize when his king was beyond reason, beyond caution, beyond everything except primal instinct. This was one of those moments. "I'll ready the horse myself," Garrick said, already moving toward the door. Then he paused. "My lord, who is she?" Theron's expression shifted into something Garrick had never seen before. Not quite wonder, not quite pain. Something caught between the two, raw and devastating. "I don't know," Theron said quietly. "But Fenris does. He's been calling her name for the last hour." "What name?" "Lyanna." The name hung in the air between them, strange and beautiful and impossible. Garrick wanted to ask more questions. How did Theron's wolf know a name he didn't? How could a stranger be his mate? Why now, after 3 centuries? But the look on his king's face killed the questions before they could form. 5 minutes, Garrick said instead, and disappeared into the corridor. Theron turned back to the window. The storm was worsening, if that was even possible. Temperature was dropping toward -15. Visibility was near zero. No one in their right mind would go out in this. But Fenris was howling inside him, battering at his control with a desperation that bordered on madness. "She's dying. She's dying. Go! Now!" Theron closed his eyes and reached for the mate bond, that invisible thread that connected two souls across any distance. It should have been strong, bright, undeniable. Instead, it was barely there. A gossamer strand so thin it was almost invisible, pulsing with a rhythm that was slowing with each passing second. A heartbeat, her heartbeat, and it was stopping. Theron didn't remember moving. One moment he was at the window, the next he was racing through the fortress corridors with inhuman speed, taking stairs 3 at a time, shouldering past startled pack members. He burst into the stables to find Garrick already there, tightening the saddle on Obsidian, a massive black war horse that had carried Theron through 100 battles. "My lord, at least take guards." Theron vaulted into the saddle. "Open the gates." Theron, "Open them." The command wasn't human. It was pure alpha dominance, laced with power that made every wolf in hearing range snap to attention and obey without thought, including Garrick, who ran to the gate mechanism and hauled on the chains with desperate strength. The massive iron-reinforced gates groaned open. Beyond them was nothing but white chaos, the storm in all its fury, waiting to devour anyone stupid enough to challenge it. Theron kicked Obsidian forward without hesitation. The cold hit him like a hammer. Even with his supernatural constitution, even with alpha strength and healing, the wind was brutal enough to sting exposed skin and turn breath to ice. Obsidian snorted protest, but obeyed powerful legs, driving them forward into the teeth of the blizzard. Behind them, the gates closed with a boom that was swallowed instantly by the storm. Ahead was 20 miles of mountain wilderness in near zero visibility. No trails, no landmarks, just instinct and that fading thread of the mate bond pulling him forward. Theron leaned low over Obsidian's neck and let Fenris take over. The wolf's senses were sharper, better suited for this. He could taste the scent on the wind, now stronger despite the storm. Could feel the bond like a compass pointing true north. Could hear nothing. The heartbeat had stopped. No. Fenris exploded forward, taking full control. Theron felt his body change, not a full shift, but something in between. His eyes shifted to wolf, glowing silver in the darkness. His senses expanded to supernatural levels. His strength doubled, then tripled, driving Obsidian to speeds that should have been impossible in these conditions. They tore through the forest like a black comet. Trees flashed past. Snow flew up in sheets. Obsidian's hooves found perches where there should have been none, guided by instincts older than thought. 5 miles, 10, 15. The bond was so faint now it was almost gone. Just the barest whisper of existence, like a candle flame in a hurricane. 20 miles. There. Theron hauled on the reins, and Obsidian skidded to a stop at the edge of a clearing. In the center stood an ancient tree, and at its base, a shape in the snow. Small, still, covered in white except for one splash of red that even the blizzard couldn't hide. Blood. Theron was off the horse before he could think, running across the clearing, dropping to his knees beside her. His hands were shaking as he brushed the snow away from her face. Pale skin, blue lips, frost on her eyelashes. So cold she felt like carved ice. "No," he whispered. "No, you don't get to die before I've even met you." He pressed fingers to her throat. No pulse. Pressed his ear to her chest. No heartbeat. She was gone. Had been gone for how long? Minutes, seconds. It didn't matter. Fenris was roaring denial so loud it drowned out thought. This was his mate, his Lyanna. She belonged to him, and he would not lose her. Not like this. Not ever. Theron tore off his heavy fur cloak and wrapped it around her, then lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, felt fragile as glass. The wound in her hip was still bleeding sluggishly, a deep puncture that should have healed hours ago if she'd had access to her wolf. But he could feel it now, the wrongness inside her. Something blocking her healing, her shifting everything that should have made her strong. Someone had done this to her, had broken her. And when he found out who, later. First, survival. He carried her to Obsidian and mounted in one smooth motion, cradling her against his chest. Her head lolled against his shoulder, lifeless. But Fenris refused to accept it. The wolf took control again, and this time something different happened. Power flowed out of Theron, like water golden and warm pouring into the fragile body in his arms. It was the mate bond, not complete, not sealed, but present enough to create a conduit. His life force flowing into her, his warmth becoming hers, his heartbeat trying to restart hers. "Come back," Fenris growled into the void. "Come back to us. You are ours." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a flutter, faint as a moth wing. But there, her heart beat once. Theron's own heart nearly stopped from relief. He kicked Obsidian into motion, racing back toward Iron Peak, with his mate held close, channeling every ounce of power he could spare into keeping that fragile heartbeat going. One beat, then another, each one stronger than the last, now fed by his energy. Alive, barely. The ride back was a blur. Snow, darkness, the storm trying to tear them apart. But nothing mattered except the woman in his arms and the desperate race against death itself. When Iron Peak's gates finally appeared through the blizzard, Theron was shouting before he'd even reached them. "Elowen! Get Elowen now!" The gates opened. Warriors scattered from his path. He carried his mate through corridors that had never known such urgency, taking her not to the guest wing, but up the winding stone stairs to his own royal chambers rooms that hadn't seen another soul in over a century. He laid her gently on the massive bed with a tenderness that contrasted sharply with the violence radiating from every line of his body. The mate bond was screaming at him to protect, to heal, to destroy whoever had hurt her. But first, "My lord," Elowen appeared in the doorway, ancient and unflappable, as always, carrying the healer's bag she never traveled without. She took one look at the pale figure on the bed, and her professional calm cracked for just a second. "Dear Mother Moon." "Save her," Theron said. His voice was flat, empty, on the edge of something that might shatter the world if she said the wrong thing. Elowen moved to the bedside, already assessing with hands that had healed thousands over her long life. "How long has her heart been stopped?" "I don't know, minutes maybe. I restarted it with the mate bond, but it's weak, Elowen." His voice broke. "I can't lose her, not when I just found her." "You won't." Elowen's tone was ironclad certainty. "But I need you to step back, my lord. Your wolf is too close to the surface. If I have to hurt her to save her, Fenris won't let me." It took everything Theron had, every ounce of 300-year-old self-control, but he managed to step back, managed to let the healer do her work, managed to not rip apart everyone and everything that stood between him and his mate. Managed, barely. Elowen began her examination with practiced efficiency, cutting away the tattered, bloody clothes with silver scissors. The wound in the hip revealed itself, deep, ragged, still seeping blood. Puncture wound from teeth, recent 6 to 8 hours based on clotting patterns. Should have closed by now with any normal wolf healing. Her hands moved to the girl's throat, checking pulse with 2 fingers. Heartbeat present, but thready. 42 beats per minute, severe bradycardia. She pressed an herb-spelled stone to the pale forehead. The stone glowed briefly, then turned blue-white. Core temperature, 88.3 degrees, stage 3 hypothermia. Another hour and her organs would have started shutting down. Elowen's expression was grim. "My lord, this girl should be dead 3 times over. That she's not is..." "What?" Theron demanded. "Extraordinary." Elowen turned the girl carefully onto her side to check for other injuries. Then she froze. "Mother Moon, preserve us," she breathed. "What is it?" Theron crossed the room in 2 strides, unable to stay back any longer. There on the pale skin between her shoulder blades was a mark that made his wolf snarl in instinctive fury. Not a scar, not a tattoo, a brand intricate and cruel, shaped like thorny vines wrapped around a crescent moon. The silver lines seemed to pulse with a dark light of their own radiating wrongness that made the air itself feel heavy. "What is that?" Theron's voice was deadly quiet. Elowen touched it carefully with one fingertip, then jerked her hand back as if burned. She pulled a small vial from her bag, moon-blessed water, and let a single drop fall on the brand. The water hissed and evaporated instantly, leaving behind a sulphurous smell. "Dark magic," Elowen said, her voice tight. "Very old, very powerful, this brand." She traced the air above it, not quite touching. "It's not just on her skin, it's woven into her spirit, wrapped around her wolf like chains. It's blocking everything, her healing, her shifting, her memories. Whoever did this didn't just want to hurt her. They wanted to erase her, turn her into a ghost of what she should be." "Can you remove it?" Theron's hands were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. "Not without killing her. The brand has integrated too deeply over." Elowen paused, studying the pattern more closely. Years, many years. This wasn't done recently. She looked up at Theron. "My lord, I need to examine her blood. There's something about this brand pattern that seems familiar." While Elowen worked, drawing a small sample of blood into a crystal vial, Theron stood vigil. He watched the unsteady rise and fall of his mate's chest, listened to her heartbeat slowly strengthening as his channeled energy continued to flow through their bond. She was so young, couldn't be more than mid-20s at most. What had happened to her? Who had done this? And why Theron? Elowen's voice pulled him from his thoughts. The old healer was holding the vial of blood up to the moonlight streaming through the window, and her expression had gone from concerned to shocked. "Look at this." The blood in the vial was glowing. Not brightly, but unmistakably. A faint silver luminescence that pulsed in rhythm with the girl's heartbeat. What does that mean? It means she's not just any wolf. Elowen's hands were shaking slightly as she set the vial down. This reaction, I've only seen it in the oldest texts. Blood that glows under moonlight belongs to royal Alpha bloodlines. The first children of the moon herself. Theron, this girl is Alpha born. Direct descent from one of the founding packs. Which pack? Elowen carefully touched the brand again, this time with a silver instrument that let her examine it without direct contact. This pattern, thorny vines around a crescent moon. I've seen something similar in the archives. It was used by Shadow Moon Pack. They were masters of moon magic, could weave it into physical forms for protection and healing. But this, she gestured at the brand. This is a perversion of their techniques. Someone took Shadow Moon magic and twisted it into a weapon. Theron's mind was racing. Shadow Moon was destroyed 9 years ago, wiped out completely in a rogue attack. The reports were filed by Marcus Stoneclaw of Crackstone. Garrick's voice came from the doorway. He'd entered silently, holding several old ledgers. "I started searching the archives the moment you left. My lord, the more I read, the less sense those reports make. Marcus claimed to have witnessed the attack, but his territory is 40 miles from where Shadow Moon was located. Why would he have been there? Unless he had a reason to be," Theron said slowly. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture that made rage coil in his gut. Shadow Moon had something valuable, something worth destroying an entire pack for. "The Moon Gem," Elowen said quietly. "According to legend, Shadow Moon guarded a relic called the Moon Gem. It was supposed to amplify a wolf's connection to their primal nature, make them exponentially stronger." After the massacre, the gem was never found. It simply vanished. "Along with everyone who might have known where it was," Garrick added. "My lord, if this girl survived the Shadow Moon massacre, if she has their brand on her back, she's a witness," Theron finished. "Possibly the only one. And if Marcus finds out she's alive..." A soft sound from the bed made them all turn. Lyanna's breathing had changed, becoming less shallow, more regular. Her eyelids fluttered. "She's waking," Elowen said quickly, moving to the bedside. "My lord, you should..." But Theron was already there, pulling a chair close. When he spoke, his voice was gentler than Elowen had ever heard it. "Easy. You're safe here. No one will hurt you." Lyanna's eyes opened slowly, revealing irises. The color of moss in deep forest flecked with gold. For a maze, they were unfocused, confused. Then they found Theron's face and terror flooded through them, the instinctive fear of prey before a predator. She tried to move to get away, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The wound in her hip sent a spike of agony through her that made her cry out a broken sound that had no words in it, just pain and fear. "Don't move," Theron said, holding his hands up where she could see them, keeping them non-threatening. "You're badly hurt. You need to stay still." She was breathing too fast now, panic taking over. Her gaze darted around the room, massive stone walls, a fire larger than she'd seen in years, furnishings that spoke of wealth and power. Nothing familiar, nothing that made sense. And the man before her was enormous, radiating strength that every instinct screamed was dangerous. Where her voice was barely a whisper, rough from years of disuse and screaming into wind and cold. "Who?" "You're in Iron Peak Fortress," Elowen said, moving into Lyanna's line of sight with deliberate slowness. "In the northern territories of Montana. I'm Elder Elowen, a healer. You were found in the storm last night near death. We brought you here to save your life." Lyanna's eyes fixed on Elowen with desperate intensity. The old woman seemed less threatening than the massive male. "Why?" "Because you were dying," Theron said simply, "and I couldn't let that happen." "Why?" The question again, but this time there was something else in it. Confusion, disbelief, as if the concept of someone helping her was so foreign, it couldn't possibly be real. How long had she been alone, Theron wondered. How long since anyone had shown her kindness? "Because it's what we do," he said. "We protect those who can't protect themselves. You're a wolf, even if you can't shift right now. That makes you pack whether you know it or not." She stared at him, searching his face for deception and finding none. Slowly, the panic receded. Not gone. She was still tense as a drawn bowstring, ready to flee at the first sign of threat, but no longer on the edge of total breakdown. "What's your name?" Elowen asked gently. Lyanna opened her mouth, closed it, her brow furrowed as she searched through the fog in her mind. The brand on her back pulsed once as if tightening its grip. Her voice broke. "I don't know. I can't. There's nothing. It's all empty." Tears welled up, spilling over. "I don't know my name. I don't know where I came from. I don't know anything." The despair in those words hit Theron like a physical blow. Complete amnesia. 9 years. It had to be 9 years if Elowen was right about the brand's age of living with no identity, no past, no sense of self, beyond the animal need to survive. "It's all right," Theron said, and was surprised by how steady his voice remained when Fenris was howling inside him. "You're safe now. We'll help you figure it out, but for now you need a name, something to call you." He glanced at Elowen, who gave a small nod of encouragement. The name his wolf had been screaming for hours rose to his lips unbidden. "Lyanna," he said softly. "How about Lyanna?" The effect was immediate and startling. Lyanna went completely still, her breathing stopping for a long moment. Her eyes, those forest green eyes, locked onto his, with an intensity that made the mate bond flare between them, like struck lightning. "Lyanna," she whispered, testing the word. Her hand moved unconsciously to her chest as if feeling for something that should be there but wasn't. "That's why does that feel right? Like I should know it." "Because it's yours," Theron thought. "Because my wolf recognized your soul the moment I caught your scent, and he's been calling your name ever since. But he couldn't say that. Not now. Not when she was so fragile." "Maybe you'll remember in time," he said instead. "For now it's yours if you want it." She was quiet for a long moment, still staring at him with those ancient young eyes. Finally, "Lyanna." "All right. If I'm someone, I'll be Lyanna." Then softer. "Thank you for the name. For," she gestured weakly at the room, the bandages, everything. "For saving me." "You don't need to thank me," Theron said. "Just focus on healing." But Lyanna was already looking at Elowen. "You said I was near death. How near?" Elowen exchanged a glance with Theron, silently asking permission. At his nod, she answered honestly. Your core temperature was 88 degrees when we brought you in. Your heart had stopped. You'd lost approximately 40% of your blood volume from the wound in your hip. By all rights, Liana, you should be dead. That you're not is impossible. Liana's laugh was bitter. I've been impossible for a long time. I don't know how I survive, but I keep doing it. Like something won't let me die even when I want to. The casual mention of wanting to die made Theron's chest tighten, but before he could respond, Liana's expression shifted from bitter to confused. Wait, you said my heart stopped, but I'm alive. How? She looked at Theron, really looked at him for the first time. You did something. When you carried me, I felt. She struggled for words. Warmth, like someone was holding me from the inside, pulling me back. The mate bond, Elowen said quietly. Since Theron seemed unable to speak, it connected you and Theron. Let him share his life force to restart your heart. Mate bond. Liana's eyes went wide. As in you mean, she looked between them. That's not possible. I don't even know him. I don't know anyone. The bond doesn't require knowing. Theron finally found his voice. It recognizes souls, not memories. My wolf Fenris. He knew you were my mate the moment I caught your scent on the wind. He's been calling your name for hours, even though I'd never heard it before. Liana was shaking her head, eyes bright with unshed tears. No, that's not. I can't be anyone's mate. I'm broken. I can't even remember who I am. I can't shift. Her voice cracked. I'm nothing. Oh, you survived 9 years alone with no memories, no wolf, and a cursed brand trying to erase you. Theron said, his voice hard. That's not nothing, Liana. That's strength most wolves couldn't imagine. She stared at him, tears streaming freely now. You don't understand. I've been alone so long. I've forgotten what it's like to not be alone. And now you're telling me I have a mate, that I'm supposed to be part of a pack, that I'm something more than just. She couldn't finish the words, dissolving into quiet sobs. Theron's hands clenched with the effort of not reaching for her. Every instinct screamed to comfort, to hold, to take away her pain. But she was terrified and traumatized, and forcing contact would only make it worse. You don't have to accept anything right now, he said gently. The bond is there, yes, but I'm not asking you to claim it. Not until you're ready. Not until you know who you are and can make that choice freely. He stood slowly, giving her space. For now, just rest, heal. We have time. Do we? Liana looked at the brand on her arm. She could see the edge of it curving over her shoulder. Someone did this to me. Someone who wanted me to, what did you say, be erased. What if they find out I'm alive? What if they come for me? Then they'll have to go through me, Theron said, and there was nothing gentle in his voice now. And I promise you, Liana, anyone who tries to hurt you again will learn exactly why I'm called the Alpha King. The certainty in his words should have been frightening. Instead, Liana felt something she hadn't felt in 9 years. Safe, just for a moment, just enough to let her eyes close and her body sink into the soft bed. Just enough to stop fighting for one single breath. Sleep, Elowen said softly, adding a touch of power to the words that made it irresistible. When you wake, we'll begin figuring out who you are. Liana's breathing evened out as healing sleep claimed her. Theron and Elowen stood silent vigil for a long moment. Finally Garrick spoke from the doorway. My lord, what do you want me to do about Marcus? Theron's expression went cold as winter stone. Nothing, yet. If he thinks she died 9 years ago, we'll let him keep thinking that. In the meantime, he turned to face his second. Find out everything you can about Shadow Moon's fall. Every report, every witness, every detail. I want to know exactly what happened 9 years ago. And when we know, then we make Marcus Stoneclaw answer for his crimes. Theron looked back at the sleeping figure on his bed. She deserves justice, and I'm going to make sure she gets it. As Garrick left to begin his research, Elowen packed up her supplies. I'll prepare tinctures to help weaken the brand's hold. If we can get her memories back, we'll know for certain what happened. Do what you can, Theron said. I'll be here if she wakes. Elowen paused at the door. My lord, be careful. The mate bond is powerful, But she's fragile in ways that have nothing to do with her injuries. If you push too hard, I know. Theron settled into the chair by the fire, his gaze never leaving Liana. I've waited 300 years for her Elowen. I can wait a little longer to do this right. The healer nodded and left, closing the door softly behind her. Alone with his sleeping mate, Theron let his guard drop for the first time since catching her scent. The fear he'd felt when her heart stopped. The rage at whoever had branded her. The fierce, overwhelming need to protect her from everything that had hurt her. I don't know your story yet, Liana Moonshadow, he said quietly to the sleeping figure. But I promise you this, however it begins, it doesn't end in more pain, nor while I'm here. Outside, the storm finally began to break. Dawn was coming to the northern territories, and with it, the first day of Liana's new life. Day 1. Liana woke to pain, not the distant, almost comfortable pain of dying by hypothermia. This was sharp and immediate, her hip a mass of fire, her arm where the wolf had bitten her throbbing in time with her heartbeat. Every muscle ached, her throat was raw. Even her eyelids hurt when she tried to open them. But she was warm. That was new. That was almost worth the pain. She managed to pry her eyes open and found herself staring at an unfamiliar ceiling, rough-hewn stone beams supporting a roof that had probably stood for centuries. Not a cave, not a hollow tree. A real room with real walls and a real bed that felt like clouds compared to this frozen ground she was used to. Memory came flooding back. The storm, the dying, the impossible warmth that had pulled her back. The man Theron with eyes like winter moonlight and a voice that had given her a name. Liana. She tested the name again in her mind, rolling it around like a stone to check its weight. It still felt right in a way she couldn't explain. You're awake. The voice made her start heart suddenly hammering. She turned her head slowly because sudden movements made the room spin and found Theron sitting in a chair by the fireplace. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, still wearing the same clothes from last night. Had he slept at all? How long? Her voice came out as a croak. 14 hours. He stood and moved to a table, pouring water from a pitcher into a cup. It's afternoon. Do you think you can drink? She managed a nod. Theron approached, carefully broadcasting his movements so as not to startle her, and helped her sit up enough to sip. The water was cold and sweet, and the best thing she'd ever tasted. Thank you, she whispered when she drank her fill. Are you hungry? Liana had to think about that. Hungry was such a constant state that she'd stopped noticing it years ago. But yes, her stomach was a hollow ache that had nothing to do with her injuries. I think so. I'll have food brought. Theron moved toward the door, then paused. Liana, earlier before you fell asleep, you asked if the person who branded you might come back. I need you to know, these are my personal chambers, the most secure location in Iron Peak. No one enters without my permission. You're safe here. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly her chest ached. But 9 years of looking over her shoulder, of trusting nothing and no one, couldn't be erased by a few kind words. Why? The question burst out before she could stop it. Why do you care what happens to me, the mate? Bond, you said you'd wait, that I didn't have to accept it. So why are you doing this? Theron was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard before. Because I've lived 300 years, Liana. 300 years of duty and responsibility and doing what was necessary for my pack. I have seen things that would break most wolves, done things I'm not proud of, made sacrifices I can never take back. He met her eyes. And in all that time, I've never met anyone who survived what you have. Never seen strength like yours. The bond makes me want to protect you, yes, but even without it. He shook his head. Even without it, I would help you, because you deserve better than dying alone in the snow. Liana felt tears break at her eyes again. When was the last time someone had said she deserved anything? When was the last time anyone had seen her as more than a ghost, a wandering nothing? I don't feel strong, she admitted quietly. Strength isn't about feeling strong. It's about getting up when every part of you wants to stay down. Theron moved back toward the door. Rest. I'll return with food soon. After he left, Liana let herself relax slightly into the pillows. The room was almost overwhelmingly comfortable. Thick furs, soft blankets, heat from the massive fireplace that kept the winter cold at bay. Part of her kept waiting for it to be snatched away, for this to be revealed as some kind of cruel dream. But the pain in her hip was real. The exhaustion weighing down her limbs was real. And when she reached for that strange warmth she'd felt in the storm, the mate bond Theron had called it, it was still there. A golden thread connecting her to something strong and steady. She didn't understand it, didn't know if she wanted it, but it was there. And for now, that was enough. Day 2. Elder Elowen arrived at dawn with herbs and tinctures and a no-nonsense attitude that reminded Liana vaguely of someone, a woman with gentle hands who'd sung while she worked. The memory was there and gone before she could grasp it, leaving behind only a sense of loss. Let's have a look at that hip, Elowen said, already pulling back the covers with the confidence of someone who'd been doing this for decades. The wound looked better than Liana expected. The edges were pink, with new skin the stitches holding. Without her wolf to speed healing, it would take weeks to fully close, but at least it was progressing. "You're lucky," Elowen said as she applied fresh bandages. "That bite missed your artery by perhaps half an inch. Any deeper and you'd have bled out in minutes." "I don't feel lucky," Liana said, then immediately regretted it. "Sorry, I didn't mean you saved my life. I should be grateful." "You should be honest." Elowen's sharp eyes found hers. "Gratitude and honesty aren't a mutually exclusive, child. You can appreciate being alive while also acknowledging that the circumstances that brought you here were terrible." She finished tying off the bandage. "Now how much do you remember about the attack? The wolves that bit you?" Liana closed her eyes, trying to recall details through the fog of pain and panic. 3 of them, huge, moved wrong, too coordinated, like they were all thinking with one mind. Their eyes, she shuddered. Their eyes glowed, not natural wolf glow, something else. Elowen went very still. "Show me your arm, where one bit you." Liana pulled back her sleeve. The bite mark was healing too, but slower than it should, and around it, barely visible under the bruising, was a pattern. Faint, silvery, almost like thorns. Elowen breathed. "Child, the wolves that attacked you, they bore brands like yours. They were controlled." "Controlled by who?" "That's what we're trying to find out." Elowen pulled out a small vial filled with silver liquid. "This is a tincture made from shadow moon herbs. Very rare. I had to recreate it from century-old texts. If you drink it, it should help weaken the brand's hold on your memories. Let you remember who you were before." Liana stared at the vial. Part of her desperately wanted those memories back, wanted to know her name, her family, where she came from. But another part, the part that had survived 9 years in the wild, was terrified of what she might remember. "What if," she swallowed hard, "what if I remember something terrible? What if there's a reason I don't remember?" "Then you won't face it alone." Theron's voice came from the doorway. He'd been so quiet she hadn't heard him enter. "Whatever is in your past, Liana, we'll deal with it together." She looked at him at the certainty in his silver eyes and felt something in her chest crack open. When was the last time someone had promised to stand with her? When had she ever not been alone? "All right," she said quietly, taking the vial from Elowen with trembling hands. "Let's find out who I am." The liquid tasted like moonlight and bitter herbs and something else she couldn't name. The moment it hit her tongue, the world tilted sideways. Images crashed through her mind like a broken dam of face, male, kind eyes and graying hair, laughing as he tossed a small child into the air. "Higher, Papa, higher." A woman singing in a language Liana didn't consciously know, but understood soul deep. Her hands weaving silver light into protective wards around a settlement. A boy, maybe 8 years old, presenting a carved wooden wolf with shy pride. "I made it for you, Leah, for your birthday." A gathering under a full moon. Dozens of wolves, her wolves celebrating. The taste of summer berries and the smell of pine smoke. A symbol on a banner, a silver crescent moon, cradled by flowing water. her symbol, her pack's symbol, Shadow Moon, and then the memories turned dark. A visitor, grey-haired, cold-eyed, smiling a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Join with me, Orion. Together we could control the Moon Game's power, make our packs unstoppable. Her father, because that kind man was her father. She knew it with bone-deep certainty, shaking his head firmly. The Moon Game is not a weapon, Marcus. It's a sacred trust. My answer is no. The visitor, Marcus leaving with that same cold smile. I hope you don't regret that decision. 3 days later, midnight, fire everywhere, screaming, warriors with that same mechanical glow in their eyes, attacking without warning, without mercy. Her mother's voice rising in a final desperate spell, trying to protect the children in the nursery. Cut off mid-word as a blade found her throat. Her little brother's hand slipping from hers as he fell, blood blooming across his chest, his eyes wide with confusion. Laya, why running? Her father pressing something blazing with silver light into her hands. Run, little moon! Hide this! Don't let him have it too! But she wasn't fast enough. Marcus catching her at the border, ripping the Moon Game from her desperate grip. His cold smile as he pulled something from his pack, a brand glowing silver hot with stolen magic. I could kill you, he said conversationally. But death is mercy, and you moon shadows don't deserve mercy. You live, little wolf, but you live as a ghost. No name, no memories, no pack. A warning to anyone who thinks to defy Marcus Stoneclaw. The brand pressing into her back, the smell of her own flesh burning. The pain, Liana came back to herself screaming. Strong arms caught her before she fell, pulling her against a solid chest. Theron's voice in her ear, low and steady, repeating her name over and over like an anchor. Liana, I'm here. You're safe. Come back to me. She clutched at his shirt, sobbing into his chest, barely coherent. He killed them. Marcus Stoneclaw. He killed them all. My father, Orion Moonshadow. He said no to an alliance, and Marcus, he came back with an army, burned them, murdered them, everyone. My mother, my brother, Ash. He was only 8. Her words dissolved into incoherent grief. Theron held her through it, one hand cradling her head, the other wrapped around her shaking shoulders. The mate bond blazed between them, his strength flowing into her, keeping her grounded when everything in her wanted to fly apart. When the worst of the storm had passed, when she could breathe again without it turning into sobs, she pulled back enough to look at him. I'm Liana Moonshadow, she said, her voice hoarse but steady, daughter of Alpha Orion and Luna Elena. The past tense hit her like a blow. I'm the last of Shadow Moon Pack. Marcus destroyed them 9 years ago, took our sacred relic, the Moon Game, and he branded me so I'd forget. So I'd wander the wilderness like an animal until I died alone and unnamed. You're not alone anymore, Theron said, his voice vibrating with barely controlled rage. Not at her, never at her. At Marcus, at what had been done to her. And you're not unnamed. You're Liana Moonshadow, last daughter of an alpha line. That means something. That means everything. Liana looked up at him, seeing the fury in his eyes. Fury on her behalf. What are we going to do? Theron's expression softened slightly. You don't have to do anything, Liana. This is my fight now too. No. She pulled away, sitting up despite the way it made her hip protest. He murdered my family, my pack, took everything from me and left me to rot. This isn't just your fight, Theron. It's mine. Her voice cracked. I need to face him. To make him answer for what he did. You can't even shift, Theron pointed out, not unkindly. The brand. Then we break the brand. Liana looked at Elowen, who'd been standing silent witness to the entire breakdown. You said you could weaken it. Can you break it? Elowen shook her head slowly. Not without killing you, child. It's integrated too deeply. But she pulled out another vial, this one filled with liquid that glowed faintly golden. I may be able to create a temporary suppressant, something that would hold the brand in check for a few hours. Let your wolf emerge. Once, maybe twice if we're lucky. How long would it take? To brew 3 days. To work. Elowen looked at the brand on Liana's shoulder, visible now that her shirt had shifted. The moment you take it, you'll have approximately 6 hours before the brand reasserts control. Use that time wisely because the backlash afterward, she shook her head. It won't be pleasant. I don't care about pleasant, Liana said. I care about justice. Day 3. Garrick arrived while Liana was struggling through the painful process of learning to walk again. 3 days of bed rest had weakened muscles that were already compromised by 9 years of bare survival. Every step sent fire through her hip, but she refused to give up. My lord, Garrick said from the doorway, carefully not looking at Liana's graceless stumbling. I finished the initial research. Theron, who'd been spotting Liana in case she fell, straightened immediately. And, "You're not going to like it." Garrick produced a leather-bound ledger. Shadow Moon Pack population approximately 150 wolves was reported destroyed 9 years ago on March 15th. Official cause rogue attack. Sole witness Marcus Stoneclaw, who claimed to have arrived too late to help. Convenient, Liana muttered, lowering herself carefully back onto the bed. Very, Garrick agreed. Especially considering Marcus's territory is over 40 miles from where Shadow Moon was located. No good reason for him to have been nearby. He opened the ledger. But here's what's interesting. In the 9 years since Shadow Moon's destruction, Marcus's pack has doubled in size. He's challenged 3 other alphas for their territories and won all 3 challenges. His son Draven has become known as an unbeatable fighter, 43 sanctioned kills. And that's just what's documented. How does a pack double in size in 9 years? Theron asked. By absorbing smaller packs who are vulnerable without Shadow Moon's protection, Garrick said. Marcus claimed he was honoring their memory, taking in refugees. But he pulled out a separate document. I found reports of wolf disappearances across 5 territories. 47 documented cases of wolves going missing and never being found, all in areas Marcus has influence over. The branded wolves, Liana said, remembering those mechanical eyes. He's been building an army. For 9 years, Garrick confirmed, using Shadow Moon magic, stolen magic, to create controlled sleepers. Wolves who look and act normal until Marcus activates them. Theron's hands clenched. What's his endgame? The council gathering, Garrick said. It's in 6 days. Every major alpha in the northern territories will be there. Marcus has been pushing for years to expand the council's power, giving alphas like him more authority. If he shows up with an army of controlled wolves, he could stage a coup, Theron finished. Take out every alpha who opposes him in one strike. Liana felt ice settle in her stomach. We have to stop him. We will, Theron said. But not by rushing in unprepared. Marcus has been planning this for 9 years. We need evidence. Proof that even his allies can't ignore. I'm proof, Liana said. I'm a survivor of his genocide. Your memories aren't enough, Garrick said, and his tone was apologetic. Not legally. The council will say the amnesia makes you an unreliable witness. That trauma confused you. Marcus will claim you're delusional, seeking attention, anything to cast doubt. Then what do we need? Theron exchanged a long look with Garrick. We need one of his sleeper wolves. Alive, branded, willing to testify about how they were taken and controlled. And we need to catch Marcus, actually using the moon gem, Garrick added. Proof that he has it, that he's been using Shadow Moon magic for his own gain. 6 days, Liana said. How do we do all that in 6 days? Carefully, Theron said, and with help. Day 4. The help arrived at dawn in the form of 3 scouts, lean, dangerous-looking wolves, who moved with the easy confidence of people used to operating in hostile territory. This is Kara Finn and Thorsten. Garrick introduced them. My best reconnaissance team. They've been watching Marcus's compound for the last day. Kara, a woman with sharp features and sharper eyes, stepped forward. Lord Blackridge, we've identified the holding facility where Marcus keeps his branded wolves. It's a converted warehouse on the eastern edge of his territory. Guarded but not heavily, he thinks the brands themselves are security enough. How many wolves inside? Theron asked. We counted 23, Finn said. His voice was rough, like he'd damaged his throat at some point. Maybe more in the basement levels we couldn't access. They're kept in cages most of the time, only brought out when Marcus needs them for something specific. Liana felt sick. 23 people, maybe more, stolen from their lives and turned into weapons. How many of them had families, friends' lives they were trying to get back to? Can we get to them? She asked. Thorsten, the largest of the three, built like a wall, shook his head. Not without being detected. The compound has guards rotating every 4 hours, and there are sleepers patrolling too hard to tell which wolves are controlled and which are just loyal to Marcus. What about the council gathering? Theron asked. Will he bring them there? Unknown, Kera said. But he's been moving supplies, weapons, armor, provisions for extended deployment, and we've seen him drilling them, making them practice coordinated attacks. Her expression was grim. Whatever he's planning, it's big, and it's happening soon. Liana stood, ignoring the pain in her hip. Then we need to move faster. We need to get at least one of those wolves free before the gathering. Someone who can testify. Too risky, Garrick said immediately. If Marcus realizes we're onto him, he'll move up his timeline, strike before we're ready. And if we wait, he'll strike at the gathering and kill everyone, Liana countered. We need evidence now. She's right, Theron said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Marcus has been building toward this for 9 years. He's not going to wait longer than necessary. We need to force his hand, make him move before he's ready. How? Garrick asked. Theron looked at Liana, and she saw the plan forming in his eyes. By giving him a target he can't ignore. It took her a moment to understand. Then, me, you want to use me as bait. I want to let Marcus know that the last moon shadow is alive and under my protection, Theron corrected. That will accomplish 2 things. First, it'll panic him, make him sloppy. Second, it'll force him to come after you directly, which means we'll know where he is and what he's planning. That's insane, Garrick said flatly. My lord, she can barely walk. She can't shift. If Marcus sends his sleepers, then I'll be there to stop them, Theron said. Along with every loyal warrior in Iron Peak, Liana won't be alone. Liana's mind was racing. It was risky, insanely risky, but it might work. And more importantly, it would draw Marcus out, make him show his hand. I'll do it, she said. Liana. I'll do it, she repeated, meeting Theron's eyes. He took everything from me. My family, my pack, my memories. For 9 years, I've been nothing but a ghost. Well, I'm done being a ghost. It's time Marcus Stoneclaw learned that some ghosts bite back. Day 5. The message was sent at dawn, carried by a neutral courier to every major pack in the region, including Marcus. Let it be known that Liana Moonshadow, daughter of Alpha Orion and last survivor of Shadow Moon Pack, has claimed sanctuary at Iron Peak. Any wolf who wishes to pay respects or contest this claim may do so at the council gathering 6 days hence. AlphaKing Theron Blackridge. The response was immediate and violent. At noon, 6 wolves attacked the eastern border of Iron Peak territory. Their eyes glowed with that same mechanical light Liana remembered from the forest. Sleeper wolves sent to kill her before Marcus's secret was exposed. They didn't succeed. Theron's warriors had been ready positioned at every access point. The fight was short and brutal. 3 sleepers killed, 3 captured alive. One of the captured wolves was brought to Iron Peak in chains. She was young, couldn't be more than 20, with tear tracks cutting through the grime on her face. When Eloin administered the tincture to break the brand's control, the girl came back to herself screaming, "Where? What?" She looked around wildly, seeing Iron Peak's walls, Theron's warriors, Liana watching from a doorway. I was in Crackstone territory. He took me. Marcus took me, and then her hands went to her neck, feeling for the band that was no longer visible, but still there under the skin. Oh gods, what did he make me do? You attacked Iron Peak, Garrick said, not unkindly. Under his control, it wasn't your choice. How long? The girl's voice broke. How long has he had me? Eloin checked the brand carefully. Based on the scarring, 8 months. Maybe 9. 8 months of being a puppet. 8 months of her life stolen. The girl sobbed, and Liana felt an answering ache in her chest. She knew what that felt like, knew what it was to have your life taken by Marcus's cruelty. "What's your name?" Liana asked, gently, moving closer despite the way it made her hip protest. The girl looked up, seeing Liana for the first time. Mira Ashwood. I was traveling to visit my sister in Northridge Territory. I never made it." "Your sister is probably still looking for you," Garrick said. "We'll send word. Let her know you're safe." "Safe?" Mira laughed bitterly. "I'm branded with dark magic. My mind was stolen for months. How am I ever going to be safe again?" "Because Marcus Stoneclaw is going to answer for what he did," Liana said. The certainty in her voice made everyone turn. "To you, to me, to everyone. But I need your help, Mira. I need you to tell the council what he did. Be a witness." "They'll never believe me," Mira whispered. "Why would they believe someone like me?" "Because you won't be alone," Liana said. "I'll testify too, and we'll have evidence, the brand the other freed sleepers, everything Marcus has done. Together we can stop him." Mira studied Liana's face for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "All right, I'll do it. Someone needs to make him pay." Day 6, the council gathering was held in neutral territory, a massive stone hall that had been built specifically for interpack politics. Every alpha in the northern territories was required to attend along with their advisors and key warriors. Liana had never seen so many wolves in one place. The hall was packed hundreds of people representing dozens of packs, all watching as Theron made his entrance. She walked beside him, dressed in white and silver shadow moon colors that she thought lost forever. Elowen had found the fabric in Iron Peak's stores, had stayed up all night altering a dress to fit Liana's too thin frame. The effect was immediate. Conversations died as people recognized the colors, the symbol embroidered on the chest, a silver crescent moon. Whispers followed them through the hall. "Shadow moon. Impossible, they're extinct. Is that really?" And then Liana saw him. Marcus Stoneclaw stood near the center of the hall, surrounded by his delegation. He was older than in her memories. 9 years had put gray in his hair and lines on his face. But those eyes were the same, cold, calculating, utterly ruthless. When he saw her, he went white as bone. For just a second, his careful mask cracked and pure shock flashed across his face. She was supposed to be dead, should have died 9 years ago, or at worst died nameless in the wilderness. She should not be here dressed in her pack's colors, walking beside the Alpha King. Liana met his eyes across the crowded hall and smiled. Not a friendly smile. A promise. "I remember. And you're going to pay." Marcus recovered quickly, his expression smoothing into diplomatic concern. But Liana had seen the panic, had felt it through the connection that linked all their fates together. The game was on, and this time she wasn't running. The council convened with traditional formality that felt suffocating after 9 years of wilderness freedom. Alphas took their seats in a circle, 12 of them representing every major territory in the northern Rockies. Theron sat at the head as Alpha King, with Liana standing behind him in the position reserved for a Luna Queen, though she'd accepted no such title. She could feel Marcus's eyes on her like ice water down her spine. He sat 3 seats to Theron's right, his son Draven beside him, a massive man who looked like he could snap bones as easily as twigs. And behind Marcus, barely visible in the shadows, was a young woman with careful eyes and a mouth set in a hard line. His daughter Liana realized. Seraphine. The woman's gaze kept darting between her father and Liana, something unreadable flickering in her expression. "We have much to discuss." Alpha Fenric of Ironwood territory began. He was old, his muzzle grey even in human form. Trade disputes between Crackstone and Riverside, the rogue activity near the southern borders, and he glanced at Liana. Apparently a resurrection. Low laughter rippled through the hall. Not cruel, just surprised. Dead packs didn't come back. "Shadow Moon Pack was destroyed 9 years ago," Marcus said, his voice carrying effortlessly. He bet it had years to perfect this performance. "A tragedy. You all mourned their loss, but this," he gestured at Liana with something that almost looked like concern. This girl, whoever she is, cannot possibly be who she claims. Shadow Moon had no survivors. Because you made sure of it, Liana said quietly. The hall went silent. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. I'm sorry, child. I know trauma can confuse memories, but I witnessed the aftermath of Shadow Moon's destruction myself. Rogues had torn them apart. There was nothing left to save. You're a liar. Liana's voice was steady despite her racing heart. There were no rogues, Marcus's stone claw. There was you, your warriors, your controlled wolves, with brands like the one you burned into my back. Shocked whispers erupted. Several alphas leaned forward, suddenly interested. Controlled wolves. Alpha Fenric's bushy eyebrows rose. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime. Daron said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. And we have evidence. He gestured to Garrick, who'd been waiting by the door. Garrick entered with Mira, still pale, still shaking, but walking under her own power. Behind them came two more freed sleepers, both branded, both willing to testify. This is Mira Ashwood, Theron continued. She was taken 8 months ago while traveling to visit her sister. These are Kyle Ironwood and Yara Stormwind, taken 14 months and 6 months ago, respectively. All three bear brands, created with Shadow Moon magic. Marcus stole after destroying their pack. Mira stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. He kept us in cages, in a warehouse on the eastern edge of Crackstone territory. There are more, at least 20 others still there. He uses the brands to control us. Make us do, her voice broke. Make us do things we'd never choose. Attack people, kill for him. We can't fight it, can't even remember most of it afterward. The hall exploded into chaos. Alphas shouting questions, Adizers conferring frantically, warriors reaching for weapons. This was beyond politics. This was a violation of every law that held wolf society together. Lies. Marcus was on his feet now, his carefully maintained calm finally cracking. This is a conspiracy by Black Ridge to undermine my pack. These people are actors. The brands are fake. I've done nothing. Then you won't mind submitting to a truth test. Theron interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. Elder Elowen has the necessary herbs. We can verify every claim made here, unless you're afraid of what the truth will reveal. Marcus's jaw tightened. A truth test would expose everything: the massacre, the Moongem, the sleeper army. But refusing would make him look guilty to every alpha in the hall. He was trapped, and he knew it. I have nothing to hide, Marcus said, but his voice had gone cold, dangerous. But before I submit to this farce, I invoke ancient right, trial by combat. He gestured to Liana. This girl accuses me of genocide. Very well, let her prove her claim. If she's truly Shadow Moon, truly the daughter of an alpha, let her fight for her pack's honor. Murmurs of approval rippled through the hall. Trial by combat was old law, sacred law. No alpha could refuse a direct challenge. She can't shift, Garrick protested immediately. The brand? Then she's no alpha, Marcus said with a cold smile. Just a traumatized girl with convenient memories. He looked at Draven. My son will serve as my champion, as is my right. Does the girl accept? Every eye turned to Liana. She could feel Theron tense beside her, feel his wolf howling protest through their bond. This was suicide. She couldn't shift, could barely walk without pain, and Draven had killed 43 wolves in sanctioned combat. But if she refused, Marcus would use it as proof she was lying, would claim she backed down because she knew her accusations were false, and the council would believe him because wolves respected strength above all else. She had no choice. I accept, Liana said clearly, but I set the terms. When I win, you submit to the truth test and you release every sleeper wolf you've created. All of them, freed and compensated for their suffering. Marcus's smile widened. When you win, such confidence. Very well, those terms are acceptable. He paused, then added with cruel emphasis, though of course they're meaningless. You won't survive the first minute. The combat circle was cleared in the center of the hall, a space 20 feet across marked by centuries-old wards that would contain the fight. No weapons, no interference, just two fighters and ancient law. Draven stepped into the circle, first rolling his massive shoulders. Up close, he was even larger than Lyanna had realized, at least 6'8", probably 280 pounds of solid muscle. Scars crisscrossed his arms and chest, testament to dozens of fights survived. He looked at Lyanna with something that might have been pity. "I'll make it quick," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "You won't feel much." "That's kind of you," Lyanna said, stepping into the circle. Elowen had given her the suppressant an hour ago, the tincture that would hold her brand in check for 6 hours. She could feel it working, feel her wolf stirring for the first time in 9 years. But the brand was strong, so strong. She didn't know if the suppressant would be enough. She didn't know if she'd survive long enough to find out. Theron grabbed her arm as she passed his grip, gentle but desperate. "You don't have to do this. We can find another way." "There is no other way." She met his silver eyes, saw the fear there. Fear for her. "But Theron, if something goes wrong..." "Nothing will go wrong," he said fiercely. "You're going to win. You're going to shift. And then you're going to show Marcus exactly what it means to face the last moon shadow." She wanted to believe him. Wanted it so badly. Her chest ached. Instead, she just squeezed his hand once, then pulled away and walked to the center of the circle. The elder officiating the combat, a grizzled woman named Astrid, raised her hand. "This is trial by combat witnessed by the council. The accused may yield at any time. The fight ends with submission, unconsciousness, or death." She looked between them. "Begin." Draven moved first. For someone so large, he was terrifyingly fast. His fist came around in a haymaker that would have shattered her skull if it connected. It didn't. Lyanna ducked under the blow, using the momentum to drive her elbow into his kidney. The strike hit the pressure point perfectly, a move Garrick had drilled into her over 3 days of brutal training. Not enough to stop Draven, but enough to make him grunt. He spun faster than she expected, his backhand catching her shoulder and sending her stumbling. Pain exploded through her recently healed body, but she converted the stumble into a roll, coming up several feet away. The crowd was murmuring now. They'd expected her to go down in the first exchange. That she hadn't was already defying expectations. "You've had training," Draven observed, circling her carefully now. "Someone taught you to fight." "I taught myself to survive," Lyanna corrected, matching his circle. Her hip was screaming protest, the wound pulling with every movement. She couldn't keep this up for long, couldn't outlast him. She needed to end this fast. Draven charged like a bull, trying to use his superior size and strength to overwhelm her. Lyanna waited until the last possible second, then dropped and swept his legs. He was too heavy. Her sweep barely moved him, but it threw off his balance just enough that his tackle went wide. He crashed past her momentum, carrying him into the edge of the warded circle. The crowd cheered. Someone shouted encouragement, but Lyanna knew she'd just gotten lucky. Draven was faster now, angry, his attacks coming in combinations that forced her to give ground. Once, twice, 3 times, his fists came within inches of connecting. The 4th time he caught her. His punch landed square in her wounded hip. The pain was blinding, white hot, driving every thought from her mind except agony. She went down hard, blood spreading across the white fabric of her dress as stitches tore. The crowd went quiet. Draven stood over her, breathing hard. "Stay down," he said, and there was something in his voice. Not cruelty, almost regret. "Please, just stay down." Behind him, Marcus was smiling. Victory within reach. Lyanna looked up at Draven through the red haze of pain and saw something unexpected in his eyes. Doubt. As if some part of him didn't want to be here, didn't want to be his father's weapon. "Why?" she gasped. "Why do you serve him? Can't you see what he is?" Draven's jaw tightened. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then, "Because he's my father. Because loyalty to evil is not loyalty." Lyanna interrupted. "It's just evil by another name." Something flickered across Draven's face. Then his expression hardened. "Stay down," he repeated and moved to finish the fight. But Liana was already moving. She rolled, got her hands under her, pushed through the agony, screaming from her hip. Her vision grayed at the edges. Her body was telling her to quit, to lie down, to let the darkness take her. But she'd spent 9 years refusing to quit. 9 years of getting up when everything in her wanted to stay down. 9 years of surviving when death would have been easier. She wasn't stopping now. Is that all? She spit blood, forced herself upright. 9 years ago, Marcus burned my pack alive. My family died screaming. My 8-year-old brother looked at me as he died and asked why. Her voice rose. You think a broken hip is going to stop me? You think pain matters? After that, I've survived worse. I'll survive you too. The words hung in the air, raw and terrible. Draven hesitated. Actually hesitated, his hands dropping slightly. "Father," he said without turning. "She can't even stand properly. This isn't honorable." "Finish it," Marcus commanded. "That's an order." And Liana saw it the moment Draven's doubt crystallized into something more. He looked at his father, really looked at him, and saw what Liana had seen 9 years ago. The cold eyes, the cruel smile, the complete absence of mercy. "No," Draven said quietly. The hall erupted into shocked gasps. "What?" Marcus was on his feet. "I said no." Draven's voice was louder now, carrying. "This isn't a fight. It's an execution. And I won't." He stopped, seeming to struggle with something internal. Then his shoulders straightened. "I won't be your weapon anymore, father. Not for this." Marcus's face went purple with rage. "You dare." But Liana wasn't listening anymore, because something was happening. The suppressant Elowen had given her was reaching critical mass, combining with her desperation and the mate bond's strength and 9 years of locked-away power. The brand on her back was burning. Not the dull ache she'd lived with for years. This was active, searing pain, as the dark magic fought against the forces trying to break it. She could feel her wolf clawing at its cage, could feel the moon itself pressing down, demanding her transformation. "I am Liana Moonshadow," she said, her voice resonating with power that made the wards around the circle flare. "Daughter of Orion, last of Shadow Moon, and I am done being your victim." The brand exploded. Light erupted from her back, pure silver, bright enough to make people shield their eyes. The thorny vines that had held her wolf captive for 9 years shattered like glass, and Liana felt her true nature surge forward with the force of a dam breaking. The shift took her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't controlled. 9 years of suppressed transformation happened in seconds. Bones breaking and reforming, muscles tearing and regrowing, fur erupting from skin that had been human for far too long. And when it was done, the wolf that stood in Liana's place was impossible. Her fur was pure white, not grey white or cream white, but the white of fresh snow under full moonlight. Her eyes burned silver, reflecting the moon's light even in the torch-lit hall. She was massive, nearly as large as Theron's alpha form. Every line of her body speaking of power that had been dormant but never diminished. A white wolf. The council had read about them in histories. Once in a century, the moon blessed an alpha bloodline with a white wolf, a symbol of destiny, of faith's chosen. They were said to be unstoppable in battle, touched by the divine born to lead, and Liana was one of them. The hall fell into absolute silence. Even Marcus looked shaken, his face pale. Draven, who'd been standing closest, dropped to one knee, not in submission, in awe. "Mother Moon," he breathed. Liana turned her silver gaze on him, and Draven felt the full weight of alpha dominance crash over him. Not cruel, not angry, just absolute. The dominance of a wolf who'd earned her power through suffering and refused to be broken. She stepped past him without attacking. He wasn't the enemy, just a weapon that had been used. She had no quarrel with weapons. Her quarrel was with the one who'd wielded them. Liana walked toward Marcus, each paw step deliberate. The crowd parted before her like water wolves, instinctively moving away from a predator, far above them in the hierarchy. Marcus stumbled backward, and for the first time in 9 years, Liana saw real fear in his eyes. "This is impossible," he said, his voice shaking. You were broken. I broke you." Liana shifted back to human form, something that should have been impossible so soon after her first transformation in 9 years. But white wolves played by different rules. Someone threw a cloak around her shoulders. She accepted it without looking, her eyes locked on Marcus. "You tried to break me," she corrected her voice, carrying to every corner of the hall. "You murdered my pack, branded me like cattle, left me to die in the wilderness. For 9 years I wandered with no name, no memories, no idea who I was. Do you know what that's like, Marcus? To not even know your own name." Marcus said, nothing still backing away. "But here's what you didn't understand." Liana continued, stepping forward for every step he took back. "You can't break what's already survived, the worst you can do. Every day I lived was a victory you didn't want me to have. Every sunrise I saw was proof that your cruelty failed." She stopped, letting her words sink in. "Then I invoke the right of blood justice. You murdered my family, my pack. And now before this council you will answer for it." Marcus's eyes darted toward the exit, calculating his chances of escape. He didn't get the chance to try. Theron was there, his massive black wolf form blocking the door. Behind him, a dozen Iron Peak warriors had shifted, forming an impenetrable wall. "Going somewhere, Stoneclaw?" Theron's voice rumbled, more growl than words. Marcus spun, reaching for his collar. He pulled out a chain, and hanging from it was a crystal the size of a fist glowing with corrupted silver light. "The moon gem." "You want proof?" Marcus snarled, holding the gem high. "Here's your proof. I took it from Shadow Moon because Orion was too weak to use it properly. For 9 years, I've used its power to build an army to create order where there was only chaos. And yes, I'll use it to remake the northern territories into something stronger than Black Ridge's outdated kingdom." He confesses. Elder Astrid said, her voice heavy with shock. "Before the council, he confesses to genocide and theft of sacred artifacts." "I confess to necessity," Marcus shouted. "Power was radiating from the moon gem, now dark and wrong. Shadow Moon hoarded power that could have united us all. So I took it, and I'll take more if I have to, starting now." He crushed the gem against his chest. Dark silver light exploded outward, and Marcus's body began to change. Not a normal shift, this was something else, something enhanced by 9 years of using the moon gem to amplify his strength. His wolf form, when it emerged, was huge, nearly as large as Theron's, and his eyes glowed with that same mechanical light as his sleeper wolves. "Kill them." Marcus's voice was distorted in human. "Kill them all." Throughout the hall, wolves began to convulse. The sleeper agents Marcus had planted, disguised as guards, as advisors, as innocent attendees, activated all at once. Their eyes lit with that eerie glow, and they turned on the people around them with sudden, horrifying violence. Chaos erupted. Theron's warriors engaged immediately, trying to protect the council members. But there were too many sleepers, at least 20, all fighting with mechanical precision. And Marcus was charging straight at Liana. She shifted mid-leap, her white wolf form, meeting his corrupted one in a collision that shook the floor. They rolled, teeth snapping for throats, claws raking. Marcus was stronger than he should be, the moon gem's power flowing through him. But Liana had something he didn't. She had 9 years of desperate survival. She had the memories of everyone he'd killed, screaming for justice. She had a mate bond with the Alpha King, flooding her with strength, and she had fury. They broke apart, circling. Marcus's lips pulled back in a snarl. "You should have stayed dead, little moon shadow. Should have frozen in that forest like I planned." Liana's response was a howl that made the windows crack. Every wolf in the hall, every single one except the mind-controlled sleepers, fell to their knees as alpha dominance rolled over them in an unstoppable wave. Even Marcus staggered. In that moment of weakness, Liana struck. She went low under his guard, her teeth finding the vulnerable hollow of his throat. But instead of killing, instead of taking the easy revenge, she wrenched sideways and tore the chain holding the moon gem free. The gem tumbled across the floor. Marcus's enhanced form immediately began to shrink, his borrowed power draining away. And without his control, the sleeper wolves throughout the hall began to collapse, their brands releasing them all at once. Elowen, who'd been prepared for this, immediately began administering her tincture to the fallen. One by one, they came back to themselves, confused, traumatized, but free. Marcus, now just a normal-sized wolf, scrambled for the moon gem. Theron's massive paw came down on it first. "No!" Theron growled. "Your game ends here." Marcus shifted back to human age at 10 years without the moon gem's power sustaining him. He looked old suddenly, brittle. "You don't understand," he said, his voice desperate now. "I needed it. Shadow Moon wouldn't share, so I took it. I did what I had to do to survive, to thrive." "You murdered 150 people," Lyanna said, shifting back to human as well. "Children, elders, my 8-year-old brother, for a rock." "For power," Marcus screamed. "For the strength to matter in a world where only the strong survive." "Then you'll appreciate the irony," Theron said coldly, "when the council strips you of every shred of power you have left." The trial that followed was swift, with Marcus's own confession, with 36 freed sleeper wolves as witnesses, with the moon gem as physical evidence. There was no defense he could mount. The council's verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all charges: genocide, theft of sacred artifacts, creation and use of enslaved wolves, conspiracy to commit mass murder, sentence execution, and complete dissolution of Cragstone Pack. All assets seized. All family members investigated for complicity. Marcus screamed threats as they dragged him away. Promised revenge so Lyanna would regret this, cursed everyone in earshot. Lyanna watched him go and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph. Just exhaustion and the echoing emptiness where her family should have been. Justice didn't bring them back, couldn't undo 9 years of suffering. It was just an ending, nothing more. "Lyanna," Theron's voice pulled her from her thoughts. He was back in human form, a cloak wrapped around his shoulders. "It's over." "Is it?" She looked at him with ancient eyes. "Marcus is gone, but Shadow Moon is still dead. Nothing changes that." "No," Theron agreed gently. "But you're alive, and as long as you are, Shadow Moon lives too. Not as it was, it can never be that again, but as something new, something that honors what was lost by refusing to let the future be destroyed too." She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that survival was enough, that being the last moon shadow meant something beyond just being the last. But she was so tired, and she hurt, and her family was still gone. Theron must have seen it in her face because he stepped closer. "Come home, Lyanna. Let me show you what comes next." "What does come next?" "That's up to you." He held out his hand. "But whatever it is, you don't face it alone. That's what mates do. What Pack does. We carry each other when the weight gets too heavy." Lyanna looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Then slowly she took it. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady. The mate bond sang between them, no longer desperate or emergency-driven, just present, solid, real. "All right," she said quietly. "Take me home." 1 week later. The Hall of Echoes, at Iron Peak's highest point, had been prepared for a ceremony that hadn't been performed in 3 centuries. The last time an Alpha King had taken a Luna Queen Theron had been young, barely 100 years old, watching his own parents bond. Now he stood at the center of the hall, Garrick beside him, holding the ceremonial cloak, while hundreds of pack members filled the space to witness. Lyanna walked toward him through the crowd, and Theron's breath caught. She wore white and silver shadow moon colors she'd reclaimed. Around her neck hung the moon gem, purified by Elowen over days of careful ritual. Its dark taint burned away. It glowed with clean silver light once more. Not a weapon, a symbol of what had survived. Behind her walked the freed sleeper wolves, 23 from Marcus's warehouse, another 18 who'd been activated at the council gathering. All freed, all healing, all choosing to stay at Iron Peak where they'd found sanctuary. Mira walked closest to Liana, her hand on the hilt of a borrowed sword. She'd asked to serve as honor guard, to be part of something that mattered. Liana had agreed immediately. When Liana reached the center, Theron took her hands. The mate bond between them was complete now, not forced, not emergency-driven, but freely chosen on both sides. It blazed like a star. Liana Moonshadow, Elder Elowen's voice rang out. You have been tested by fire and ice. You have proven your strength, your honor, your worth. Do you accept the role of Luna Queen of Iron Peak to rule beside the Alpha King as equals to protect and guide our pack? I do, Liana said clearly. And do you swear to honor Shadow Moon's memory, to carry their legacy forward, to ensure their sacrifice was not in vain? I swear it. Her voice was stronger now. She had been eating regularly for a week, training with Garrick, healing in body and spirit. The hollow look was fading from her eyes, replaced by something that looked almost like hope. Theron stepped forward and lifted the ceremonial cloak, deep black lined with white fur, the colors of both their packs merged into one. He settled it across her shoulders, and the weight of leadership, of responsibility, of belonging settled with it. Then, by the authority of pack law and the blessing of the moon herself, Elowen said smiling, I name you Luna Queen. Let anyone who challenges that come forward now or forever remain silent. Silence. Then Garrick dropped to one knee, and like a wave every wolf in the hall followed. Even Draven, who'd asked permission to attend, he'd been investigated along with the rest of Marcus's family, but Seraphine had testified that he'd been unaware of their father's crimes. That when given the chance to refuse, he'd chosen honor over obedience. Now he knelt with the others, head bowed. Liana looked out at the sea of kneeling wolves and felt tears prick at her eyes. A week ago, she'd been alone, nameless, broken. Now she stood crowned, claimed, surrounded by people who called her queen. Thank you, she whispered, to all of them, to fate, to the moon herself. Theron raised their joined hands. My mate, my Luna, my queen. The crowd roared approval. That night, after the feast, after the last guest had finally left them in peace, Liana and Theron stood on the highest balcony and looked out at the mountains. What happens now? She asked. Now. Theron pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her from behind. Now we rebuild. Shadow Moon will have a memorial here at Iron Peak. Your people will be remembered, their names carved in stone so they're never forgotten. Liana leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Orion, Elena, Ash, all 150 of them. All of them, Theron confirmed. And someday, his hand moved to her stomach where new life had already begun to grow. The pack doctor had confirmed it that morning. Someday, the moon shadow line will continue. Liana's hand covered his wonder and fear, warring in her chest. A child. I'm going to have a child. We are, Theron corrected gently. Together. And they'll know their heritage. Know their grandmother Elena, who sang magic into being. Know their grandfather Orion, who chose honor over power. Know their uncle Ash, who carved wolves from wood and gave them as gifts. They'll know about Marcus too, Liana said, her voice hardening slightly. What he did, what he took, so they understand why strength without mercy is just cruelty. They will, Theron agreed. But they'll also know that their mother survived, that she refused to break, that when everything was taken from her, she built something new from the ashes. He turned her in his arms, so she faced him. You are the beginning, Liana, not the end. Shadow Moon doesn't die with you. It transforms, becomes something stronger. She looked up at him, at the silver eyes that had found her in a blizzard and refused to let her go. I love you, she said. The first time she'd said it, the first time she'd let herself believe it was real. I know. His smile was gentle. I've loved you since my wolf howled your name in the storm, since before I had ever seen your face. That's what fated mates are, souls that recognize each other across time and distance and death itself. He kissed her, then slow and deep, and the mate bond blazed between them like the sun. Below them, Iron Peak glowed with firelight. Behind them, the mountains stood eternal. Above them, the moon, full and bright and approving, cast silver light across a world that had been reborn. 3 months later, the Shadow Moon Memorial stood in Iron Peak's central plaza, a circle of white stone pillars, each carved with a name. 150 names. Orion, Elena, Ash, all the fallen remembered forever. Liana visited every morning, placing winter lilacs at her family's stones. The flowers grew impossibly. In Iron Peak's gardens, now alone had used Shadow Moon techniques to cultivate them, a living reminder of what had been lost. Today, she wasn't alone. Luna Queen, Mira, approached with her young niece, the sister she'd been traveling to visit, when Marcus took her. The little girl, maybe 5 years old, clutched a handful of lilacs. We wanted to pay respects. My niece wanted to thank you. The child stepped forward, solemn beyond her years. Mama says you saved Aunt Mira, that you freed her from the bad man. I did what anyone would do, Liana said gently, kneeling despite the way her growing belly made it awkward. She was 4 months along now, showing clearly. Mama says not everyone would, the girl insisted. She says you're brave, like the white wolf in the stories. I'm just someone who refused to quit, Liana said. But she accepted the flowers, placing them with the others. Thank you. These are beautiful. After Mira and her niece left, Liana sat by the memorial for a while, one hand on her stomach, where her child, her daughter Elowen, had confirmed, grew strong. I hope you're proud, she said quietly to the names on stone. I know I couldn't save you, but I saved others. I made sure Marcus paid, and I'm building something new, something that honors what you were, while becoming something that can survive in this harder world. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of lilacs and pine. For just a moment, Liana could have sworn she heard her father's laugh, her mother's song, her brother's voice saying, I'm proud of you, Leah. Then it was gone, leaving only peace. Across the plaza, Draven was training a group of young wolves, teaching them combat but also teaching them honor. The difference between strength and cruelty. He'd asked to stay at Iron Peak to learn to be something more than his father's weapon. Liana had agreed, seeing in him the same desperate need for redemption she understood all too well. Seraphine worked in the healing halls with Elowen, learning to undo the damage her father had caused. She'd wept when she found the records. All 47 wolves, Marcus had branded their names, their stories. Now she was dedicating her life to healing what had been broken. The territories were healing. Slowly, carefully, but healing. Liana stood brushing off her dress. She had a council meeting this afternoon, her first as an official voting member. Had packed business to attend to. Had 100 small responsibilities that came with being Luna Queen. But first she had one more visit to make. She found Theron in the training yard, working through sword forms with Garrick. He moved with the deadly grace of 300 years of practice, each strike precise and powerful. When he saw her, he stopped immediately, sheathing his blade. Everything all right? Everything's perfect, Liana said, and realized she meant it. Not perfect, like nothing hurt. Perfect, like she'd found something worth fighting for. I was just thinking our daughter needs a name, something that honors both our packs. Theron's expression softened. He pulled her close, mindful of her belly. What did you have in mind? Elena, Liana said. For my mother, and Moira as a middle name for her grandmother, your mother. Elena Moira Blackridge Moonshadow. Theron tested the name. It's beautiful, strong. Like she'll be, Liana said with certainty. She'll know she comes from 2 powerful bloodlines. She'll know the price of cruelty and the value of mercy. She'll know that some things are worth fighting for even when the fight seems impossible. She'll know her mother is the strongest wolf I've ever met, Theron added. And that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up every single time. That evening, as the sun set over Iron Peak, Lyanna stood with Theron on their balcony one more time. The view never got old. Mountains stretching to the horizon, forests blanketed in snow, the vast and beautiful wilderness that had almost killed her, but ultimately brought her home. "Do you ever regret it?" Theron asked quietly. "Surviving, fighting back. Sometimes I wonder if it would have been easier to just die in the snow," Lyanna finished. "Let Marcus win. Let Shadow Moon be forgotten." She shook her head firmly. "Never. Not even on the hardest days. Because every day I'm alive is a day Marcus didn't want me to have. Every sunrise I see is proof that his cruelty failed." She turned to face him, placing his hand on her belly where their daughter kicked. "And because of this, because Elena will grow up knowing her heritage, because the moon shadow line doesn't end. It continues. It evolves. It survives." Theron's eyes were bright with emotion. "I love you, Lyanna Moonshadow. I loved you when my wolf howled your name in the darkness. I loved you when I found you dying in the snow. I love you now, crowned and powerful and pregnant with our child. And I'll love you in 100 years when our great-grandchildren ask us to tell them the story of the White Wolf Queen." "The story of how a ghost became a queen," Lyanna said softly. "The story of how the last Moonshadow refused to be the end," Theron corrected, "and became a beginning instead." They stood there as night fell, wrapped in each other's arms, the mate bond singing between them. Around them, Iron Peak settled into evening rhythms, pack members heading home, fires being lit, children being tucked into bed. This was pack. This was family. This was belonging. And for Lyanna, who'd spent 9 years with none of those things, it was everything. Narrator. Lyanna's story teaches us that your past doesn't define you. Your response to it does. She lost everything, but refused to lose herself. She was broken, but not destroyed. And in the end, that refusal to surrender became the foundation for something greater than anyone could have imagined. Her scars didn't make her weak. They made her wise. Her suffering didn't destroy her. It forged her into something unbreakable. And her loneliness, when it ended, made her cherish connection in ways those who've never been truly alone can never understand. She was named a ghost. She became a queen. And in doing so, she proved that our lowest moments don't determine our destiny. Our courage in facing them does. If this story moved you, remember to like this video and subscribe for more tales of survival, justice, and the unbreakable strength of those who refuse to quit. Because sometimes the coldest winter becomes the warmest spring, and sometimes the wolf left to die in the snow rises as something the world has never seen before. Thank you for listening. May your own wolves guide you home, and may you find, as Lyanna did, that the end of one story is simply the beginning of another.